Ladies and gents, good morning. And for most of you, I think it's just a welcome back. You'll be looking around saying, yep, Tom's as mean as ever, no new decor or anything, you know, feel free. And it is nice to see you all. I'm just looking at the programme, to be fair, for just about the first time. And I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, I could learn a lot today. Yeah, it's looking good. I'm just looking quickly. I'm back at 4:15. Good, I can have a snooze in between. That's good. I'm asked to talk about the domestics as well before we make a start. Being a health and safety organisation, I guess we ought to talk about it. There is no planned fire alarm, so if the alarm, which is a long, continuous, ear-deafening noise, if it does go off, what steps do you take? Bloody big ones towards the front door, the back door, out the back, anywhere you like. Okay, so it will be a real one if the fire alarm goes off. The loos, if you haven't found them already, if you're sitting cross-legged, feel free to nip back to the loo during my little 30-minute slot. Just at the back, behind the purple doors, again, most of you have been, and whatever. There's coffee and tea, soft drinks available all day. So although you maybe won't, but you know, just feel free to get up and have one when you like. But of course, there's the official tea breaks where there'll be some biscuits and such things laid out. And lunch, of course, if you've been with us on training, means that again, it's another situation for taking bloody big steps to get to the front, to make sure it's hot and you get your selection. But there's going to be plenty there. And we're looking forward to finishing round about 4:30. There will be, for those who need them, attendance certificates. I think you'll have probably stipulated with James as you were coming in whether you wanted an attendance certificate or not. Those will be ready for you at the end of the day. If you haven't stipulated and you think, what a good idea, just let one of us know during the day, and we'll make sure one's printed out for you. If you need any other sort of proof that you were here, not that you stayed awake, but that you were here, we can provide you with a letter of some sort or another. It falls to me yet again to open the conference. I keep getting wheeled out, and I can see one of these years me having to have some kind of big box here as I'm sitting in my bath chair just to raise me a little bit when I'm hitting my 90s. I hope I'm hitting my 90s eventually. And I quite like opening the conference because you're coming in thinking, what's it all about? We need a little bit of focus, and it's nice to bring you one or two bits and pieces that are happening in the health and safety world, and perhaps how we as individuals and organisations ought to respond. The first thing I need to say, you've probably noticed, is that we're being filmed. We're going onto a TV channel, a new one called the Woodward YouTube. The conference is going to start it off. If you've got any favourite, oh no, I better not ask that. No, we can't put any of your videos on, because it's got to be for universal acceptance. But I'm going to be on. So over the next half hour, if for any reason I burst into, I did it my way, it's just that I'm rehearsing for the X Factor and for Strictly Come Dancing as well. So you'll see me on the next series of those only because of this experience of our YouTube channel. How we're going to use it will be developed, and we'll let you know through newsletters. So if you don't get our newsletter on a quarterly basis, give us an email and we'll make sure you get the newsletter. But we're going to put lots and lots of different things on our YouTube channel to keep you informed of what's happening, etc., etc. In fact, my aspiration is that the newsletter will eventually become a YouTube broadcast. But there you are, isn't that exciting? One of the things I used to always look forward to as a young man at school was Wednesday afternoons. Now, if you've been off to uni or whatever, you'll know Wednesday afternoons is sports afternoon. And being of a somewhat less academic person in the school, I really did look forward to sports afternoons. And I wasn't the same size or shape as I am now. I was actually fairly skinny in those days and fairly fit. And the PE master was, dare I say, ex-military, and he had this size 11 slipper. So we conformed to the sort of requirements that he asked us to conform to. But one thing I did enjoy on Wednesday afternoons was the obstacle. We used to call it the obstacle race. He used to spend all week thinking of things to climb over and to jump off and whatever to get around this obstacle race. I used to really enjoy it. And it got me thinking about how I used to prepare for the Wednesday afternoons, because there was 4 things that spring to mind. The obstacles were obviously things to climb up and down, to jump off, etc., etc. And so the first thing is you had to be pretty fit. And I was. I was joining in all sorts of athletics, etc. But by the time you got to the end of the obstacle race, after about an hour or so, you were lying there. You know what it's like when you've done an awful lot of exercise. You know, this sort of sweat and snot and blood and everything's all mixed in. But you didn't mind. I would mind now. I mean, you know, I wouldn't like the blood anyhow. But you were lying there thinking, oh, I don't think I could do that again. But come next Wednesday, you're in amongst it again. Really good fun. He developed new dimensions to this obstacle race. He used to have us walking along 4-inch beams, balancing weights, etc. We used to be juggling. And we used to be sort of having to stand some distance away and pop balls into a net or through a hole in a piece of wood. You've seen them at the fairgrounds. We all felt like circus clowns at times, I'm sure. But we got pretty skilled at doing these things in amongst the obstacle race as well. Mind, to begin with, until you got skilled, we would all be gathering around trying to get the balls through the holes, and it was during the obstacle race on Wednesday afternoon that I broadened my whole sort of gamut of swear words. I got to know all the swear words I think that were in the, well, that we thought were in the English dictionary. A great way of maturing you, both with skills and with swear words. But we got there eventually. Once we're getting to that sort of stage where we're getting skilled at that, it threw another dimension in. And perhaps if you've been on a management team leading weekend, you've done some of these. He would get a fairly boggy part of the field, and he'd get the fire service to come in and fill it all with water and get them all trampling around, some kind of exercise for them. But it would leave a muddy bog. We had to cross it, sometimes blindfolded, with pieces of wood and planks that weren't quite long enough. Have you been on those sorts of exercises? So as well as the blood and the snot and the sweat, you would end up then covered in mud. But you know, we were young, we were stupid, I suppose, in many ways, and this was our big turn on each week. He developed the crocodile field, which I had to cross. And on many occasions, I used to go home minus 2 ankles because the crocodiles had bitten me, taken my ankles, and I couldn't complete but I was there next week again with my ankles back intact to try and cross the crocodile field. And so we got pretty good at sort of learning how to measure and appreciate what we needed to do, generally as a team, because he got us in 2s and 3s. And it was strange how you used to select the teams beforehand. Can you remember when you were a kid and you used to select your football teams? I'll have him, I'll have him, I'll have him. And after about 8 selections, you were left thinking, I am a Burke, I'm no good at football, but somebody please select me. Go on, I'll have him, you know, as much as you're going to be disadvantaged. Fortunately, I wasn't the last selected for the teams, and sometimes I was actually the team leader. Perhaps future entrepreneurs are noted during these obstacle races. After we got sort of pretty good at that, he then started mixing us with other team members who had been briefed to be awkward, to be stupid, not to follow orders, etc., etc. And suddenly introduced what I now see was a kind of management role. To develop our leaders, we had to get good at communicating with each other, almost at training with each other, liaising with each other, managing the situation, making decisions. So now on reflection, although the obstacle race was really just an excuse to some extent to get out of things like maths and English and such, I suddenly realised how they were trying to move us forward in terms of these ideas. And it dawned on me that that's exactly what we're doing as health and safety officers in an organisation. Sometimes not as part of a team of health and safety people, sometimes by ourselves, and we have to cope. Well, not just on Wednesday afternoons, unfortunately, but we have to cope on an hour-by-hour, day-by-day, week-by-week situation of obstacle races. The first thing to do is to get fit. You have to be fit. I have been in meetings where people have looked tired and you think they're not going to make good decisions here. So you've got to keep awake, you've got to keep lively, you have to keep reasonably fit. You've got to be ready, you've got to be awake for these meetings and for this liaison. You've got to develop various skills. You've certainly got to develop the decision making and the communication and the management, etc. But there's various things you have to develop in terms of working with team members who perhaps aren't on the same side as you are, or who perhaps aren't seeing things in quite the same perspective as you do. So my obstacle race has really set me up. I know health and safety is going to be a hard slog. I've got to keep physically fit. I've not yet seen a health and safety officer coming out of the union meeting, the blood, snot and sweat. But sometimes it gets close by, gets near that. We've got to have the knowledge. We've got to have the management skills to get us through. Why? What are our obstacles? Where are our obstacles coming from? I've made a little selection here of obstacles. First of all, employees. I've been around a long time. I've worked in a whole variety of different industries, and the one thing I can say is that employees are different these days than they were way back in the sort of late 60s. A lot different. You have to cope with them. They actually have been empowered. Management went through a period of empowering them, and that has a disadvantage when you're trying to get them to do things, because they do question and they want it justified and they want to see the cost-benefit analysis of everything you ask them to do, etc. They are working under more pressure. Very often the more highly skilled people, and the one thing of certainty, most employees will not just take at face value what you say. They can be pretty awkward. Employers, over the last 10 years, been delayering, getting rid of layers of management, getting rid of passengers in the organisation, really slimming down to focus on the core business. You've heard all these phrases before, but what are the effects of this? The effects are that you, trying to implement and trying to maintain health and safety in the workplace, there's more and more pressure, more and more obstacles. This fitness that you've got to get hold of is going to be more and more tricky. Dare I mention the law? I'm going to quickly mention it. Ray's following me shortly to talk a little bit about the law as well. But it's not so much the law, it's the changes. When I first came into health and safety, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go into health and safety. It never changes. And really, I am running hard, even though I am unfit. I am running hard to keep up. We are very fortunate in that we do have a really good team, all singing from the same hymn sheet and all sharing thoughts together. And I'm just about coping. If I was working here on my own, I would have really been going under by now, just coping with the changes. Just to read the changes to RIDOR alone that have been going on at the present time are a bit of a nuisance. One thing that's of much interest to me, though, is the trials for the cost recovery for HSE. The £133 an hour I've seen. And I'm now telling organisations that Woodward can prepare them so they don't have to pay HSE £133 an hour, and we'll do it £126 an hour cheaper. Well, maybe we'll be more expensive than that. Organisations aren't stupid. Organisations are catching on. And strange enough, I was just talking with Pat this morning. I was talking with Neil not long ago. Pat and Neil are very micro businesses, I suppose you could call them, working in the health and safety field, and they ain't got a minute to themselves. So anybody who says, health and safety companies aren't spending money on health and safety anymore, you're not living in the real world. There's more and more work out there. They really want to make sure they're on board, particularly for winning tenders, for legal compliance, etc. So the law can work to our advantage, and the changes that come along can work to our distinct advantage as well. So when I thought the HSE was going to be underfunded, I kind of thought, well, I wonder what implications that's going to have. At £133 an hour, the implications are okay. We're in the second year of the recession. I mentioned this actually last year. I remember talking about the recession and the implications, and we are seeing it. Training organisations generally, particularly bigger training organisations, are starting to notice less and less money is being spent on training. That has an implication for you. Perhaps personally, perhaps the next diploma, the next course, etc., is being held back for you until the next financial year. So you've got to do more yourself to learn, get the knowledge around what the organisation's doing in order to cope. We do know that training is going by the wayside. Capital budgets are now really being curtailed and cut back. Organisations don't know what's going to happen in the next year or so there's no big capital spends. And so when we're wanting to implement our risk controls to keep everybody safe, the one thing you're not going to get is any vast amounts of money to do it with. So we did look for an engineered solution. Can you remember the hierarchy? The engineered solutions, too expensive. What about something procedural? No, we haven't got any time for training all our supervisors, etc. You're going to have to go for something behavioural, something, dare I say, cheap and nasty. Well, it's cheap. We'll have to make sure it's not nasty, but we'll have to try and make sure it's only a temporary measure. We want the engineered solution. But of course, what will happen in 2 years' time, it'll become accepted as custom and practice, and it's even more difficult then to persuade the organisation to spend money. Well, it's controlled all right at present, isn't it? Real difficult times, real obstacles in our way with the recession and the economic scenario. Social expectation is continuing to move along. People are still putting in compensation claims, and although they're not being advertised on telly as much as they were, the no-win, no-claim situation is continuing to expand. So people are taking organisations to court for the simplest of reasons. We've got to cope with that. Some more of our obstacles. We're very privileged to be working reasonably closely with a very large insurance broker at the present time, and we're getting lots and lots of very useful help and advice on how insurance companies are starting to move ahead. I've always had the opinion that the main influence for conformity related to safety is more from the insurance companies than it is from HSE. HSE perhaps have counted with £133 an hour, but insurance companies are still pretty dominant. So if they're dominant and they're going to persuade companies to do certain things, and you lot have to make sure that you can deliver the goods to make that organisation conform to what the insurance demands are. What are the insurance companies asking for? The two big thrusts at the present time are induction training, to make sure induction training, and they're talking now of having some kind of national standard of induction training. Can you remember your induction training? Or can you remember your lack of induction training when you started work? Insurance companies are not going to have that at all. They're going to come up with a standard, a level, and they're talking now about having these standards accredited. Some organisations and some insurance companies are already talking about the IOSH working safely for everyone, the CIAH, health and safety in the workplace, for everyone. Now, one of your roles could well be that you'll be delivering it as part of the induction course. That's fine. Give us a shout if you need a hand with that. We've several people doing that already in organisations under our accreditation. The other big thrust, as well as induction, is related to competent people. Every organisation is going to have to prove that they have a number, according to insurance guidance, of competent people looking after projects, looking after the organisation generally, etc. They don't have to define competence. We know in health and safety what competence is all about. So that's the big thrust as well. So those extra courses, maintaining your competence could actually become slightly easier under the insurance pressures. There's a great opportunity for a lot of you, because small businesses, it doesn't matter what sort of size, obviously they've all got to buy insurance, will need a competent person. OCR and the new register are starting to notice this, and I was reading a report just a few days ago that they're now up to 4,000 hits a week on the OCR register. Nobody's approached me or anything. I mean, I'm happy to work for £2.50 an hour, but nobody's approached me. But you can imagine that that OCR register is going to be flourishing, as insurance companies, I'm sure, are going to be, well, they are saying that if they don't have a competent person, they must have a name off the OCR register as the person who's looking after the organisation. That'll happen in the next year or two. Make sure you're on the register. And finally, the government. Does this government know anything about health and safety? Who are actually making recommendations to this government? I don't know. It's hard to weigh up. Are they wanting to kill health and safety off? I don't know. Are they taking a more sensible approach to health and safety? Are they making it more viable? Are they making it more realistic? These are the sort of questions we've got to think about. I just noticed yesterday that they are going to press ahead with either reducing or taking away completely the trade union funding through the government provision. So trade unions are going to have to fund their own safety reps. Now, I don't know what your attitude is to safety reps, but I like them in as much that I think they provide some good balancing to managers and supervisors. And to be fair, for the majority of organisations, in the very early years of health and safety, it was actually the safety reps who brought good health and safety into the organisation, till managers suddenly realised that the law actually expected them to provide health and safety management. And then we got caught on, and we actually sent people off on things like NEBOSH courses and such things. But the trade union training in health and safety has been excellent. If I, in fact, went on down at the TUC Centre in London, years ago. I could hardly read and write at the time, but I remember that course was a super course, and I learned an awful lot about health and safety. Mind, there was a union bias to it, but I learned a lot. And I could protect my members, except I was a member of management. We've had the Carroll Black report. We've seen some offspin to the Carroll Black report. As far as we're concerned, the main one's the OCR register. But we are getting some companies now starting to become interested in health and well-being, as she pushed hard, of managing absence, of realising that there is a cost to absence, and there is a production cost to absence. The biggest problem we've had since the Carroll Black report has been the recession, and people just ain't got the money to spend on health and well-being because they're spending all the money on redundancy at the present time. That's the big snag. Whatever. The latest ones, the Lørsted report that's just come out, and I just want to mention one or two things about that. Ray's going to, I'm sure, pick one or two aspects up as well of it. Ease the burden on employers. So obviously employers cannot be held responsible when they've done all they can. Now that's what it says, when they've done all they can. Can you remember when we introduced reasonably practicable and nobody really understood what it was? What does that mean? When they've done all they can. And employers are sort of saying, oh, good. But in fact, I don't know whether it isn't all good. Because you'll go to court and the court will say, well, actually, you could have done this in addition. So maybe that's going to be even worse for organisations than reasonably practicable. The one good thing that Lørsted came out with was he said there wasn't anything fundamentally wrong with the whole of the setup. Health and safety is okay, it's just that it's not applied correctly. It's not being used correctly by organisations. And we see situations where it's obviously just been used. In fact, I was in Scotland yesterday, in Edinburgh, and they announced because of health and safety, the schools are closing. And I thought, oh, I thought it was because of the weather. But there you are. Health and safety is more predominant than the weather in Scotland. Self-employed people are going to get exempt. I'm still trying to work out, and there's about 1 million people who now won't be under any health and safety legislation. My answer to that is bollocks. Sorry, is probably, there still will be. They're going to review all 53 ACOPs. I didn't know there was 53, I only know about 4. And I'm a chartered I'll have to look at all 53 and see what they're going to do. I think they'll review all 53, and I think they'll end up with 53. They're going to put it into sectors. They're going to start to shuffle so that it's worked in the nuclear industry. I've got to admit, the nuclear industry is focused on several pieces of legislation, and they're going to try to move into and construction is as well, into more sectorial. But I've got a feeling that it's going to actually increase the role that we've got rather than decrease it. One of the other things that they're talking about is now moving away from having EHOs at local level and making everybody work for HSE and having a uniform, consistent standards. Now, I can remember how they said in the very early days, when the old Health and Safety at Work Act, we're going to split it because look how much you gain through having local knowledge, so we'll give it to the local authorities through EHOs, etc. They've forgotten that they said that the government said that in the day, and now they're going back to putting it to HSE. As far as I'm concerned, if they give everything to HSE, I am rubbing my hands together, and you will be if you're a trainer or a consultant, because the work will be coming out of your ears. HSE will never visit most of the organisations that EHOs do. And there was just recently an EHO report that almost closed down one of the premier restaurants in Carlisle, because although it was fantastic, it's definitely one of the fur coat and no knickers, when they went into the kitchens, they almost closed it. A premier restaurant in Carlisle. EHOs are doing a fantastic job. I think as long as we don't get food poisoning and all die with it, I think the new idea of putting it to HSE will be good for us. They're going to tinker with strict liability. I'm leaving that to Ray. It's good, isn't it? It's good. That's what you can do, you see. So, what about you then? I've got 2 minutes. What about you? You've got to keep fit. That's the first thing. You've got to keep fit for the job. Face the hard slog, and it is a hard slog at times. A lot of the job is just a hard slog. Nothing new, nothing exciting, nothing innovative. It's just coping with the day-to-day business in hand. You've got to keep maintaining new skills. Of course you have. You go on courses to do that. And you've got this CPD now to fill in. I'll have to think about mine. Almost 3 years, I think, since I did mine last. Are you doing yours electronically? Yeah, I can't even spell the words right electronically, but it's getting through okay. Knowledge is important. And what I have noticed is the magazine articles are pretty good. The debates in the magazines are pretty good, but the amount of websites that are now being built up that give you lots and lots of information to do with health and safety, phenomenally good. Except, do I get time to do it all? Do I get time to read my magazines? Do I get time to discuss with people? Do I get time to read the trade union? Do I get time to read the newsletters, etc., etc.? Time's always been a problem, and it'll still continue to be so. The management, as well as the knowledge. The management is important. We run the Petals course, preparing to teach. We don't expect to go and teach, but we expect to do good presentations. It's in the presentation. That's where you're going to persuade and win, in the presentation. We want you to make good decisions. We want you to communicate well. We want you to do all those business functions. So if you think, well, I've nothing else to do in health and safety now, go and do a management course. Go and complement your health and safety training with a manager. We don't do them, but go and do a management course somewhere and really round yourself off with the management of health and safety as well. It will help in terms of coping with behavioural safety. The register is kind of settled. They keep adding people to the register, and they want whatever the annual fee is now. I got away with a £30 one first year around, but I could imagine it'd be £560 or something to maintain another year on the OCAR register. But the one thing that we have heard, which is quite good, is that there has been lots of profuse discussions about fire risk assessment. And there's 3 or 4 awarding bodies now coming together as a lead body for fire risk assessment, and what they're going to recommend is that there's a register for fire risk assessors, for competent fire risk assessors. And there's going to be a qualification level that you've got to achieve. The qualifications are going to include the NEBOSH Fire Cert, but they're also to include some qualifications from the Institute of Fire Engineers, and this, I don't know whether the British Safety Council are getting involved, etc. In 2 or 3 years' time, there will be a fire safety register. If you're not on it, you won't be able to do fire risk assessments commercially. So keep an eye out for that as well. That is definitely going to happen. You can see it coming because it's such an important area. Lerstead has a lot in it. Carol Black's report is still continuing to carry on, but the main thing that you've got to do, and use today as, is another building block in coping, I suppose, with your own fitness, etc., for your obstacle race. Best of luck in facing the obstacles. This time next year, there'll be a lot more to face. Enjoy the day. See you later on. Thanks.